Hello, Brian.
Hello, Mohit.
Namaste. Namaste, my friend. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. We've got people coming in, Brian, right now, and there are quite a few attendees already here. Welcome, Salil, Pareen, Pramod, Somnathji, Urmi, Bhaskar, Mahendraji. Good to see you again. Elizabeth, Prashantji, Pramil, Peter, Sirish, quite a few people. Shardad, Meera, Harshi, Sri Kumar, Sri Ram, Vishal. So there are a whole lot of people who are already here, Brian, and there are people joining in. So by the time I finish introducing you, we'll probably have full house. And so friends, this webinar is going to be a very interesting one because number one, Brian himself is a very interesting man. He has turned his passion, his hobby, into his business as well. And he runs one of the most illustrious stores, optical stores for bird watchers in the UK. And I'm going to read out his introduction to you. It's a little longish one, so and you will know him better. So Brian's been interested in birds since childhood and has birded extensively in his home county of Worcestershire, where he runs the Worcester Birding Twitter page that keeps local birders up to date with all the latest bird sightings. Has also served as the county bird recorder of Worcestershire and found numerous rare birds over the years, including 4 species of duck from North America as well as many scarce migratory species. He has birded further afield in the UK and Europe and has developed a growing interest in the bird life of India since first visiting the country in 2016 and each year since. Founded the Birder store in early 2009, so that's been about 13 years, as an online store before opening up the shop in Worcester in 2012, where the business has continued to grow and now offers a huge range of optics, accessories, books, and DVDs for birders. So that's a bit about Brian, and most of you already know me, and some people may be here for the first time. So I'll quickly talk about myself. I am Mohit Aggarwal. I'm an experiential ecotourism specialist with a deep love for nature. I help people to travel to some wonderful places in Asia. I'm at the board of Asian Ecotourism Network, and I've been trained by GSTC in sustainable tourism. I'm the founder of Asian Adventures, a 28-year-old travel outfit. It's the largest and #1 birding company in India. I'm also the founder of Netta, a digital marketing company that is working towards strengthening communication for ecotourism and conservation outfits. These companies are on a large mission to help Asian elephants with their corridors, free the Himalayas of plastic waste, help small wildlife NGOs, and conserve the ancient Himalayan temples. And recently, we've started to work for the cause of pangolins in Gir, in Gujarat, where the lions are. So that's a bit about me, and that's a bit about Brian. So Brian, you should start with your magic straight away.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mohit, and thank you everyone for joining this afternoon. Welcome. Let's get the show on the road. Here we go. So this is based largely on a birding trip that I undertook back in early June with Deepak. I guess many of you will know Deepak from Asian Adventures. He
just butting in for a second, Brian. Just want everybody to say yes if they can hear you well. if there's a problem, then say so. If not, then let Brian continue. Is everybody good? Yes. Okay. Go right ahead, Brian.
Okay. Great. Thanks, mate. So yes, this webinar is basically a presentation based on a birding trip that we undertook back in early June. Myself and Deepak, we flew into Kashmir. I think it was the 2nd of June, And the main aim of it really was to see some of the really special birds, the endemic birds of this region of India. And for anyone who doesn't really know quite where Kashmir is, it's right at the very north of the country, so about as far north as you can go. It's on a similar latitude to southern Europe, and as a consequence, it's a bit of a melting pot, sort of a mixture of birds from further west, so a lot of European species that just edge into this this part of India, and obviously there is also a huge range of Indian species, so birds like ring-necked parakeet, baubles, drongos, things like house crow, spotted forktail, they're all here. But there's also this this sort of melting pot of European species. So you've got things like little bittern, common starling, European bee-eater, jackdaw, which are all, in Indian terms, are all fairly localized. And for example, common starling, although it's widespread in the winter and heads further south into India, it's only really found in this part of India as a breeding species. And the same is true of European bee-eater. So it's a really interesting area to visit if you want to see a wide range of species. So we were based in Srinagar, which is the summer capital of Kashmir. So a large city, about 1.2 million, I think. So in British terms, pretty big. And it was a great base. It's really central, as you can see there, in the centre of Kashmir. So it's easily accessible to a great variety of habitats all across the north of Kashmir. So as I say, we flew out from Delhi June the 2nd, and we after arrival in Srinagar, we were out birding, looking for some of the local specialities. And our first port of call was Shankaracharya Hill, which is just to the southeast of Srinagar, near Dal Lake. And this was a really nice place to start. We headed towards the top, and we were looking for anything we could find, really, but there was one key species that we were really keen to see. And the first birds that popped out of the bushes were things like this brown-flanked bush warbler, very common bird all across Kashmir. As time went on, well, there was rarely a time when these weren't evident. They have this really nice whistling song. So even if you can't see them, you always know they're around, skulking about in the undergrowth. Occasionally they would pop out like this one, and you get really nice views. And we also had nice views of rusty-tailed flycatcher. Again, another special bird of this area. Pretty much a sort of Indian speciality. Certainly in this area, it was very easy to see. But the flycatcher we were really after is this one, Cashmere Flycatcher. And as the name suggests, it's pretty much found only in Kashmir as a breeding species. You can see it further south in the winter. It winters in the southern states of India and into Sri Lanka. But if you want to see it in all its glory, especially a cracking male like this, Kashmir really is the place to come. And we did quite well on the hill. I think we saw 4 different birds, and the males are absolutely stunning when you see them in the sort of half light, and they often sort of just sit motionless in the darker areas of the trees. And when they're facing you full on, the intensity of the orange really is something. But yeah, really smart birds, and that was a really great start to the trip, because well, as I say, there's very few places where you can see say Kashmere Flycatcher. So that was a highlight of the day, really. But there were plenty of other birds around. Black-eared kite, they were really common. Without doubt, the commonest raptor of the area. So this is a race of regular black kite, the one that we see here. This is a sort of more easterly version of it, but a very, very common bird across Kashmir. And then when you get to the very top, you get to there's a lovely Hindu temple at the top of the hill, and then you've got these really fantastic views across to Srinagar and to the Western Himalayas in the background there, and you've got Dal Lake just in the foreground with all the houseboats. And it was a houseboat that we were staying on. This was taken the following morning, so a lovely clear start to the day, and a great spot to do some sort of relaxed, casual birding from the the front of the boat there overlooking the lake. So there's plenty of common birds to see here. Things like black-crowned night heron, Indian pond heron, little egrets, little grebes, kingfishers. I think we have three species of kingfisher, pied, white-throated and common. Really nice views. So it was a nice start to the day before we headed out birding. A few more views here. But there was one bird that I thought might occur here, which I wasn't sure, but I thought, well, it was worth scanning the reed beds. And within a few minutes, I spotted this male little bittern, and that's really pretty much the view we had. It was very distant, but undoubtedly a little bittern. So that was a really nice start, because that's a scarce bird in India. That's one of those species. It's really at the very edge of its range. And although it does occur in other states in India, this is the sort of the main centre for them. The lakes around Kashmir is the stronghold for this species. So many Indian birders would be keen to see this, I'm sure. But thankfully we did have better views a little later in the trip. So the first full day of birding, we headed out to Dachigam, which is a small, well, it's quite a big reserve actually, but it's a small distance from Srinagar. It's a national park now. It was originally the hunting reserve for the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir, and its name derives from 10 villages. It literally means 10 villages, and those villages were the villages were rehomed, and to create this protected area. So it's a fully protected forest area, lovely pristine habitat, and it's just, so, the scenery is really nice, but it's the remoteness of it and the fact that it's so unspoiled. They sort of do restrict the numbers of visitors that can visit the reserve. So we were really lucky. We had a forest guard to escort us up to this watchtower, and as you can see, the views were pretty amazing. Lovely clean rivers and a few familiar birds to make me feel like I was at home. Grey wagtail, enjoying the environment there, but also a few more sort of Indian species, Asian species, black bauble, and also this gem, chestnut-eared bunting, which we had really nice views from that watchtower. So this is a sort of Western Himalayan species which summers here, and I think they move further east in the winter, and also further into Southeast Asia they occur as well. But to see this in sort of full breeding plumage was really nice. So that was a nice bird to see. We also saw a few mammals. Yellow-throated martin. That was a bonus. I wasn't expecting to see these. I think there was 3 or 4 in this tree, and they were all. I guess they were all siblings. They were sort of squabbling amongst each other and causing a raucous in the trees. But eventually, we got really nice views of those. So that was a nice bonus. And then a bit later, we travelled just around the mountainside, really, on the other side of Dachigam, overlooking Dal Lake. That's Dal Lake there in the outskirts of Srinagar below, and we were looking for a few species, some of the European species, and common starling was fairly common here. We found them nesting. I think this is one of the local races because it's got quite a pale iris there, as you can see. But in all other respects, it's regular starling. But as I said earlier, this is pretty much the only area where they breed in India. Although they are more widespread in the winter months. White-capped bunting, that's certainly not a European bird, so that's very much a sort of Himalayan bird, and then it winters down in the plains of India. So you may have seen this if you've been to Rajasthan in winter. You may have come across this bird, but here in full summer plumage, it was really nice to see this species. And again, another species which just edges into India as a breeding bird, European bee-eater. And this was the bird we were here to see, really. That seems to be a really reliable spot. Deepak said he'd seen them there before. And sure enough, after some searching, we heard the calls in the distance. And I think we had about 11 birds in the end, which is really nice. Really good views. And again, I think there's a lot of Indian birders to see this bird because it is very, very localized. I think there's a few that winter down in the far south of India, but again, it's only small numbers. It's not by any means an easy bird to see anywhere in India. And then this is looking back from Dal Lake itself back up onto the mountainside where we were. So that sort of clear area in the centre is where the bee-eaters are favouring. And the view from Dal Lake it's stunning. I mean, it's almost got a sort of European feel to it. You can almost imagine yourself being in southern Germany or Austria. It's that sort of feel, very European feel to it. Another view across the lake, and as you can see, the habitat here is perfect for herons and egrets. And we had a good selection of those. We also had really nice views of clamorous reed warbler. One or two popped out on the wall, just completely oblivious to our presence, it seemed. So great photographic opportunities. And there were loads more singing in the reeds along the path there. I lost count of how many there were, but yeah, monstrous birds, almost thrush size, with that really long, powerful bill. And whiskered terns. I think we counted somewhere around 300 whiskered terns. There was a vast flock over the one side. They appeared to be clearing the lake of all the vegetation, and I guess that was stirring up food. And there was this huge feeding frenzy of whiskered terns. I mean, there could have been more, but I guess 300 was a fairly conservative estimate, to be honest with you. But there were further ones scattered all over the lake, so that was an astonishing sight. And in this picture of the one below, you can just see there it's actually carrying off some vegetation, I guess, to line its nest. There were quite a few birds doing that, which was interesting to see. Indian pond heron, very common. That was probably the commonest heron of the area, and again, pretty fearless. They just sort of fed right beside the path, unconcerned. And same for black crowned night heron. Really nice views of this, and all out in the open, middle of the afternoon. Very different to often how they behave in Europe. They often skulk about in the sort of late on in the day, but here, full view, great light. And this was the star heron, if you like, little bit, and this female landed right in front of us. We couldn't have been more fortunate. It showed amazingly well. I think it was slightly out of its comfort zone, to be honest. It just sort of froze for a while, and then it looked around and had a bit of a paddle, and then it after about 5-10 minutes it was off again. But while it was there, it was really nice views. And then the next day we headed west to Gulmarg, which is around 50 kilometres to the west of Srinagar. This is up in the Pir Panjal range of the Western Himalayas, so it's higher elevation than Srinagar, about 2,700 metres to the area where we birded. But the highest peak there is Aggarwal Peak, which I think is about nearly 4,400 metres. So much higher elevations here, and a completely different range of species. And the two key species that we wanted to see here were Cashmere Nuthatch and Cashmere Nutcracker. And this is the sort of habitat you're looking for them in. Extensive mountainsides of deodar forest. So yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. And some of these trees are up to 60 metres in height, so it's not easy to find other species, and you're often listening out for calls and craning your neck ever upward, hoping you're going to catch a glimpse of these localized birds. Fortunately, Cashmere Nutcracker was the first one to fall. We saw really nice views of this particular individual feeding quite low down in one of the trees. And Cashmere Nutcracker is a real local, highly localized species. Very few places other than, I think there's an isolated population in western Nepal, but really Kashmir is the sort of epicenter of their distribution, and that's probably the main target for many Western birders, or even Indian birders, I guess. They want to see this species. This is the place to come. Not an easy bird to photograph. I managed to get one more shot, and you can see the plain and undertail coverts here, which were pretty unique to this species of nuthatch. But beyond that, it's a fairly unremarkable bird, really. It's very similar in some respects to the one that we have in Europe. But it's, I guess it's a slightly longer sort of mask stripe there. It extends further back, a little bit more richly coloured. But as I say, it's not an easy bird to find, and luckily, like a lot of nuthatches, it was quite vocal, so we were fortunate to at least see this bird. Also, white-cheeked nuthatches present. I think we saw slightly more of these, probably 3 or 4. They, again, we heard them, but this one was the one that showed best. Very distinctive, obviously, and again, a fairly localized species. It has a wider distribution than Kashmir nuthatch. So mostly found in the Western Himalaya, but it extends a little bit further west and east across the range. But again, very vocal, so that helped us pin those down. And then the other special bird of this type of habitat is Cashmere Nutcracker, which, well, what can you say? It's a pretty special bird. Not dissimilar to the nutcracker we get in Europe, the spotted nutcracker, but this one is even more spotted. So it's predominantly white, certainly at a distance when you first see them, often flying from tree to tree, and then with some patience and persistence, you do get some nice perch views. Little bit thinner build, I think, than the is it thinner build than the thicker build on Kashmir compared with the one that we get in Europe. But so this is highly localized. It's only really found in Kashmir. Maybe it extends just over the border into Pakistan, I think. But this is probably the easiest place to see it. And then this one, coal-tit, or maybe not coal-tit. It's obviously clearly different to the coal-tit we get in Europe. It's pretty flamboyant-looking bird. Obviously, a much more pronounced crest, much darker. So I'm not entirely sure what the current thinking is on these. I think it may be sort of black-crested tit, maybe a future name for it. But at the moment, I think it's still part of the coal-tit family. Although, of course, there are lots of different races of coal-tit. But definitely worth seeing whether it's a separate species or not. It's lovely little birds to see, and they were very common at Gulmarg. As was this one, blue whistling thrush. Again, a common bird all across the Himalayas, but very common here, and pretty low down as well. We saw them even in the towns. You'd see them on the roofs of shops as you were driving along. But this one was presumably busy feeding its young. It seemed to have found a stash of lizards. Whether it had already killed them earlier and was coming back to collect them, I don't know. But it seemed to be feeding really well here, collecting 3 or 4 at a time. And then carrying them off downhill. Another very common bird, this is probably the commonest warbler at Gulmarg, was Western Crowned Warbler. Just pretty much every warbler you clocked, it would be Western Crowned, very vocal, lots of singing males scattered through the woodland. So they were always pleasing to see. As was this really special bird, Indian Blue Robin. I hadn't seen this before in Goa, but the views here up in Kashmir were something else. They were really, of course, at this time of the year they're singing, so they're much more conspicuous. And we managed to get really nice views of this bird. And chestnut thrush. This was, I think, this was the only one we saw during our time in Kashmir. But again, a Himalayan species. Yeah. Really nice thrush to see. And variegated laughing thrush. This was the scarcest of the laughing thrushes. We also saw streaked laughing thrush, which is very common. Variegated is a little bit more elusive, a little bit more sparsely populated in this area of the Himalayas. But we managed to get nice views of this one. And collared owlet. This isn't going to be the best picture you've ever seen of collared owlet, and it was, I think, a second later it was gone and we never saw it again. But the only reason I included this picture was because it shows a little bit a suggestion of the reverse face pattern that these birds have. So that black mark on there, that's only part of the face pattern, but that's actually the back of the head. It's looking forward, and it's pretty unique, I think, amongst the owls that it has this sort of face pattern on the back of the head. And then next day we travelled a little bit back to Srinagar, then we went down to Budgam, which was further south below Gulmarg, so a similar sort of habitat, but maybe not quite the same elevation, a little gentler, some nice alpine meadows, Again, plenty of woodland as well, but a little bit more open. Some really nice habitat. And I included this sign. I really like this sign, which I thought was just typifies, many people's approach to nature in India. So that was good to see. And then a few of the landscape shots of the area. Grey bush chat, common bird across the Himalayas, and this one was really confiding. Really nice views of this bird in the early morning light. And rufous-breasted accentor. A couple of these, I think, knocking around by that stream that I just showed you. Really nice views. Obviously related to the dunnock that we have in Europe, but a lot more colourful. Delightful little birds that we saw pottering about. And this is the area where they were in. Slightly open forest area. And then we also had good views here of rufous nape-tit. So this is a fairly localised species in the Western Himalaya. It's not obviously easy to see the rufous nape on this. It's actually easier to see the rufous vent, but this confusingly there is a tit called rufous vented tit, but that has a lot less black on the front, so the black is much more restricted and doesn't come down as low as it does on rufous nape tit. But that bird was actually feeding its young in a hole underground. I guess the hole was already there, and it taken advantage of the situation. So that was quite an unusual sight. Russet sparrow. We saw lots of russet sparrows. Again, a very common bird in the Himalaya, seemingly everywhere, particularly around villages, small fields, small holdings, that sort of thing. Usually pretty tame as well. Really nice views of those. And then this was a new bird for me, yellow-billed blue magpie. I'd seen red-billed before, but yellow-billed was it's a little bit more localized, has a slightly more westerly distribution than red-billed, which continues much further east into Asia. Yellow-billed is slightly more tied to the mountain ranges of the Himalayas. We had nice views of these. I think there were probably 4 or 5 birds that we saw that day. So that was a slightly exotic-looking bird. And then Tytler's leaf warbler. This is probably one that the European birders would be more interested in than Indian birders. This is the quintessential little brown job, not dissimilar to a chiffchaff in many respects, Siberian chiffchaff maybe, but this is very localized, similar distribution to Cashmere Flycatcher in some respects. It's largely found only in Kashmir as a breeding species, and then it winters further south into southern India. But it's, as I say, it's not an easy bird to see. It's very localized, but good numbers at Budgam. We did see plenty there, and of course they were singing, which makes life easy. But slightly odd proportions there. To say they're similar size to a chiffchaff, but much shorter tail and quite a long bill. So they have quite a unique appearance. And then moving on, it was time then to cross the Vale of Kashmir. So we're now on the other side of Srinagar to the east. It's a slightly circuitous route to get to Budgam from Srinagar. You have to head south and then back north, but well worth it, and a nice range of habitats, not dissimilar to Gulmarg. Nice river running through it here, with the Himalayas in the background there. We were searching for a special bird. And the first bird we encountered was grey heron, which, in fact, that was the only grey heron we saw in the entire trip. But the bird we were really looking for was this, and probably the main target for many birders who visit this part of India is the Ibis Bill. A unique-looking wader, really. It's somewhere between an avocet, a reverse-billed avocet. I think it's closely related to oyster catchers, maybe, but it's unique. I mean, it's so distinctive. But not necessarily an easy bird to find. Despite that, it's when it's crouched down in amongst the boulders of the river, it can be surprisingly difficult to find. But we were very lucky. We found three birds. Deepak spotted these 3 birds just huddled down in the river. A heavy rainstorm had passed through, and we got out of the car, and he soon found these birds right below us. So that was a remarkable find. And once the rain had passed through, they sort of brushed themselves off and eventually started feeding and dispersed along the river. But while they were there, it was fantastic views. And then this is us birding along the same river, just downstream of where that bird was. So it gives you an idea of the sort of habitat. And then a common bird here was white wagtail. This is one of the local races. I think this is Alboides, which is the race that occurs along the Himalayas and further east into China, but very distinctive bird. A lot more white in the wing than the birds that we get in the UK. Much more intense black around the back and head. Another common wagtail, citrine wagtail. These are the black-backed race, so very distinctive. This bird actually isn't in full plumage, but again, pretty common along the rivers and streams of Kashmir. So they were always a delight to see. And Siberian stonechat, or common stonechat. I'm not sure who splits this one from common stonechat. I think in India it's widely known as common stonechat, but I think in Europe we probably tend to call them Siberian stonechat with the white rump, obviously showing really well there. But these are pretty common in a wide variety of habitats. As is this common myna. I mean, I've only included this really just out of completeness. These were common, and obviously a common bird across all of India. But nice to see nonetheless, and it just shows how widespread they are and the types of elevations that they will occur in. And this is very much a high elevation bird, rock bunting. We saw these much higher, but this one was in Budgam, just on the edge of the town, so along the river, often quite confiding as this bird was. As was Oriental turtle dove. We saw these pretty much daily, which was always a delight considering how scarce the European bird is now particularly in Britain. So it was always good to see these at close quarters. And dark-sided flycatcher. This is a really special little bird. We saw quite a few of these. Not I think only ever singles at any one time, but really nice to see. And tiny little bills on them, just the sort of smallest bill you can imagine really on a flycatcher. You can barely see it in this fairly long range shot, but when they did show, they often gave really nice pleasing views. And then these are a few of the sort of the landscape, the habitat shots of Budgam. This is up in the hills above Budgam, where we were looking for we were really looking for orange bullfinch and spectacled finch, and despite Deepak's best efforts, we failed on both counts, but we certainly gave it a good go. But nevertheless, we saw plenty of more interesting birds. Ultramarine flycatcher. It's never a dull day when you see one of those, and we have really nice views of this bird. I think that was the only bird we saw, but great views of that. And we carried on up the hill and had further views of Indian blue robin. Never tire of the views of these. So they were always really good to see and pretty vocal. We didn't see every bird, but we certainly heard quite a few of those as we gained elevation. And another variegated laughing thrush. There were a couple of birds here, but we saw this one show nicely. And then large-billed leaf warbler. This caused me a bit of head scratching because, to be honest with you, this doesn't really look anything like the drawings you find in the field guides. It really is a really distinctive warbler. Really sort of dark markings on the head with that broad, pale supercilium. And we saw quite a few in this area, which is really good because I believe they're quite scarce in the Western Himalaya and become progressively more common the further east you go. But in the end, once we realised what we were looking at, these they were a really distinctive looking warbler, quite large and obviously a big thick set bill there. But that was a bonus. That wasn't what I was really thinking of seeing. Black and yellow grosbeak. We saw quite a few of these, more than I thought we would. But the views are always a little bit fleeting. They were quite elusive, often higher, and it was really a case of listening out for the calls. But we did get we got some record shots, and occasionally we just get enough of a view to see the little black boots, the sort of feathered thighs that could distinguish it from the very similarly plumaged collared grosbeak. But this has a slightly more westerly range than collared, so I think in Kashmir this is the only likely one you're going to see. But nevertheless, it's nice to see the distinguishing features. But it's never an easy bird to get really good views of. They are pretty fleeting when they showed up. Blumbeus water redstart, fairly common, well, very common really along most of the mountain streams and rivers of Kashmir, and they often gave really nice views. And then from Howgam we had quite a long trip. It was back down south and then back north to Srinagar, through Srinagar, and then we were heading east. So we're heading sort of slowly but surely towards Ladakh. And on our journey, we had a brief sighting of a European roller, which was nice. It was pretty distant, but that was the only one we saw, which they do somewhere in Kashmir, but fairly sparingly. So then we were heading now, as I say, we're heading east of Srinagar up into the Himalayas, and again, absolutely spectacular scenery here. The rivers are really lovely rivers to watch, to just sit and watch what's going up and down. Blue whistling thrush and brown dipper you could see here, and here's a nice juvenile brown dipper. It's often quite confiding, so that was really good to see. Large-billed crow, so this is very common across Kashmir. I think there wasn't a time really when they weren't around. It was particularly in the more wooded areas, almost like a slightly scaled down version of a raven, but much commoner than raven. And then more views of Indian blue robin. I think this site, which was at Gagangir, which is just on the alongside the Sindh River, on the main Srinagar to Leh highway, it takes you up into Ladakh. There was this really confiding bird, and again, although we'd seen many birds previous in the trip, this one was undoubtedly the showiest of all of them. And then another really colourful bird, slaty blue flycatcher, fairly widespread across Kashmir, but we only saw, I think this is the only place where we have really definitive views, where you could say that's slaty blue for sure. And we had a pair, obviously feeding young, so we had really good views of those two. And then, as I say, we're heading to Leh, so that gives you an idea of the distance we've still got to cover. We didn't make it to Leh that day. We were heading towards Sonmarg, so we were Sonmarg is high. It's heading up out of Kashmir. It's still in Kashmir, but its elevation is much greater than most of Kashmir, certainly the Vale of Kashmir. And then we did a little bit of birding around this area. It's more scattered. The trees start to thin out, and you've got sort of more alpine meadows, more rocky slopes and scree. And so it was a slightly different range of birds. Common rosefinch seemed to be a little bit more common here, and so again, nice seeing the really colourful males and listening to the songs of common rosefinch. Dark-sided flycatcher, again pretty common here. Yeah, despite the increased elevation, they seem fairly widespread across Kashmir. And then this is looking back to Kashmir as we head up to Zojila Pass, which is the route out of Kashmir if you're heading into Ladakh. This is the high mountain pass. It comes out, I think, around 3,500 meters at the top. So we were climbing up on the right hand side there of that picture. You can probably just about make out the road. A series of hairpin bends as you climb up and up and up, and then this is looking back, and then to the left, really probably only a few miles further down the road to the left is Ladakh, and that was the second part of our tour. So having spent a week in Kashmir, some fantastic birding. There were more adventures ahead of us, so we'll probably cover that, I guess, in another webinar. The big area to cover, so we'll certainly do that another time. But thank you everyone for everyone for watching, and I think that pretty much covers Kashmir.
That was wonderful, absolutely wonderful presentation, Brian. I think everybody enjoyed it. There are one or two questions that people have. For bird watchers, which months do you recommend to be in Kashmir?
I guess the time we went was very good. As I say, the only birds that the main targets that we failed to see were orange bullfinch and spectre bullfinch. And I think Deepak mentioned to me that it's probably the winter months are best for those species. But I mean, the good thing about going in summer is everywhere's open; it's accessible. Some of those routes that would be very difficult to do in the middle of winter. So logistically, summer gives you the best access and the widest range of species.
So I want you to give a very clear-cut message that how beautifully one can do this tour to Kashmir, and what are the benefits of birding in Kashmir for the people of Kashmir.
Yeah, well, I think it's important, isn't it, that they have something to celebrate, because the wildlife there is, I mean, I've only touched on it. This was very much a personal presentation based on what we saw. All the images were captured on the trip. We didn't use any library pictures. So it just gives you an overview of what is just in a week, really, what we found. Just think if you live there, the discoveries you could make. And just what a fantastic hobby to have, and spread the word about all the diversity of bird life in Kashmir. There is a Facebook group, the J&K Birdlife Facebook group, if anybody's interested in learning more about the birds of Kashmir. There's some fantastic pictures on there, far better than I'm able to take. But for the local birders, it's definitely worth engaging on that group, because it's I would definitely I'd have no hesitation in returning to Kashmir for birding. It's just superb, and the scenery, as you saw from the pictures. Why wouldn't you want to go birding there? It's a beautiful area.
So Johnny, Brian was in that area for 3 weeks, but Kashmir was 1 week, and rest of the time, he was traveling into Ladakh. So the next webinar that Brian is going to bring to us is on Ladakh, which will complete the journey of Jammu and Kashmir in this area, and that will happen sometime next month. After it takes a lot of effort to set up a webinar, and one needs to sort out pictures and put them together and call you all, and all of that. So it'll happen a few weeks later. We'll keep you informed. The second thing, Brian, would you be able to tell people what sort of equipment you used in Kashmir and why?
Sure, yeah. Well, binoculars, these. I use these. These are 1032 Zeiss. And the reason I use these is often you didn't necessarily need to take your scope if you were in a wooded area. Binoculars were sufficient, but 10 times just gave you that little bit more reach, particularly if there's a bird like the grosbeak, for example, high up in the tree. And these are really nicely balanced. They're not heavy. Obviously, the optics are superb, being Zeiss. But yeah, as a premium end travel binocular, these are about as light as they go. So this was an obvious choice to use these. We did also use a scope. Myself and Deepak, we shared a Swarovski ATS 65, again because it's nice and light, portable, and particularly, in Kashmir we rarely use the scope, to be honest. because a lot of the habitat is forest habitat. It was really just binos, but so the scope was deployed more in Ladakh, where you're out in much more open territory, scanning the mountainside for snowcocks, that sort of thing. And of course, you're at much higher elevations there as well, so you don't want to be carrying really heavy gear. You want everything to be as light as possible, particularly for somebody like me who's not used to birding at those sort of elevations. It takes a little bit of adjusting, but so yeah, keep the gear nice and light, as light as you can do, really.
Yeah, wonderful. So Parmil Kumarji has put the link here, Facebook link for JK Life, and
Right.
Thank you very much, Parmilji. I'm going to paste Brian's email address here, friends, for you to get in touch with him directly and seek knowledge or order your equipment or whatever else that you want to know from him. Please feel free to get in touch with Brian, and we'd be happy to share knowledge with you with whatever equipment he has used, or the sightings, or his birding experiences in Kashmir. There is one, or let me just quickly check if there were one or two. Yeah, so Johnny asked, how was the accommodation?
Really good. The first accommodation I showed you, the only accommodation I showed you was the houseboat at Nagin Lake in Srinagar, and that it's just the perfect base for a birder, because you have this fantastic outlook, which you saw in the pictures there. So you can have your cup of chai in the morning, just relax, do some birding before you set off. So it's just a perfect start to the day, and it's nice and peaceful, quiet at night. Yeah, I mean that if I went back to Kashmir, I'd insist on staying there again. It was really delightful place, and just nice to support local people rather than staying in some big corporate hotel. It's putting money into a small family-owned business. And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely. Ecotourism is all about that. Nature tourism, nature-centric tourism is to join the dots, to make things happen for people of that place, and give opportunities and exchange knowledge and exchange information that will also empower the local people. They'd be able to see your perspective. Why are you here? A lot of people in India still gather around you and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they say, "I'm watching birds." I mean, why the hell would you watch birds? I mean, what are you going to get out of it? So it just opens up a new dimension of life, and which is so pretty, which is so beautiful. And okay, another question here. Naveen Rekhi is asking, which is the most challenging bird you got in Kashmir?
Oh, good question. I mean, to be fair, most of the Deepak knew the spot, so I think the most challenging, really, the challenge was trying to find orange bullfinch and spectacled finch. That was that's what we put the most effort into. I suppose of the birds that we saw, it was probably Cashmere Nutcracker, because we saw that one bird at Gulmarg, but it wasn't, it was okay. There's always that bit of tension when you haven't seen it and you're searching and scanning. But yeah, I mean, orange bullfinch, spectacled finch, they will happen. Just come back and in the winter and see them. But yeah,
I got some pictures from Deepak dancing. His videos of dance. Doing a birdie dance when he saw the orange bullfinch. So yes. That was brilliant. Now, friends, I'd like to reiterate that you must get in touch with Brian to know more about his skills related to optics. We often go wrong with the kind of equipment that we must buy or purchase, depending on what your goals are, where you want to be. And Brian can really help you. We've done one webinar earlier where he's talked very extensively on the use of scopes and binoculars and monoculars, and that's on my YouTube channel. So, Fareen, can you just post that YouTube link or the channel so that people can see that and they don't make mistakes when they're finalizing their purchase of binoculars or scopes? They're not cheap in India, so you have to be judicious about making that decision. There are many other questions, friends, which you're asking. It'll be good to write directly to Brian, and he will tell you whether he saw them or he's happy to share this list as well. There is one file that you wanted to share with people, Brian. Can I do that?
Yes, please do. Yeah. So this is just an overview of the Kashmir section of the trip, really. And there's all the eBird links on there that I've uploaded. So people may find those maybe of interest, because we didn't manage to photograph every bird that we saw during the trip. It was that was certainly beyond my capabilities, but I think probably we ended up on about just over 90 species for that week, which by Indian terms isn't a huge list, but that's not really what it's about. It's quality rather than quantity in this part of India. So that was
absolutely fine. For birders to get their targets, or I don't want to call them targets, it's too much of a messy term, but we want to call them the ones that you haven't seen before, the missed ones.
Yes.
And it's Kashmir is a good place. And also Parmilji is asking if it's tough to photograph birds in Ladakh because of more exposed light. What do you recommend?
Yeah, I did find that challenge. Often you'd find the bird, just trying to get the glint in the eye is very difficult when you've got such light. So often you didn't get that. It's really difficult in the bright conditions of Ladakh. It was easier in some respects because the birds are more out in the open. Obviously in Ladakh there are very few trees, so most birds you see are out on rocks or hillsides and things, but whereas in Kashmir it's mostly wooded area, so that presents its own challenge, of course. But yeah, I mean, I'm a birder really, and if I get a picture, I get a picture. If I don't, I don't. It's nice to have that record shot, but it's not the be all and end all. So
friends, you need to know this, and I'm going to ask Brian to repeat this, that he's a birder, and if he gets a picture, he gets it. If he doesn't get it, that's fine. So what is happening right now in India is that everybody wants to become a birder by becoming a photographer. But as kids, we've been trained to draw birds and identify birds and be out in the field with our notebooks and guides and field guides to know about various aspects of the bird, And today it's a lot more easy because you can just photograph the bird and dissect the bird, not in your notebook, but in your picture. And then you come home and you post it on a group and say, which bird is it? And somebody will reply. But it doesn't bring that knowledge to you, that thrill of going deeper into each and every part of that bird, what you saw, and how things you won't even remember. So your memory sort of sharpens when you look at the bird and draw it and then put down the features of that bird. It's an ancient way of birding, and it's the best way of birding. So I'm not disputing the power of photography, but like how Brian thinks, a birder is a birder, and then he could be a photographer. So it's a good one that you said, Brian. Okay, so there are people who are talking about things that they missed, or some areas have been sort of disturbed, and so friends, this pressure thing will continue to build, but the only way to save these places is to build communities, Facebook communities or other communities, go out birding together, support each other, tell people what you saw and share that knowledge with people what you saw. Don't keep it in hiding. It doesn't mean a thing. That bird doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the skies. So don't keep your information to yourself. Yeah, if you want to try and save it from the poacher, yes, you probably could. But for it to, for people to know this is very important, because then they can also go out and see it and appreciate the beauty of these birds. And that's how you become nature lovers. Once you become nature lovers, then you connected with nature, your inner self. And that's the way to, well, I want to say save the world, sort of a thing. But that's how it is. It brings in inclusivity, oneness, many other things. And it's the best thing about birding is that it's low carbon footprint activity, much lower than the other things, correct? So, why I'm rushing right now, Brian, because I've had a power cut here right now, about 10 minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not too sure when I'm going to go offline. So if you've got other things to, friends, if you've got other things to ask Brian, you can do so in the chat. And tomorrow, you'll all get the replay link of this webinar. So in case if you missed some part of it because there was an internet glitch, don't worry about it. You will get the replay link without any problem. And Brian, do you want to say something else?
Sure. I was just looking down some of the questions. I think somebody was asking about white-bellied redstart. Yes, we did look for white-bellied redstart at Deepak 3 for along the stream there, but I think Deepak said we were a little bit too early, but we certainly we did look for white-bellied redstart. So again, one for next time.
Mr. SS Chima is asking, did you miss the tree creepers?
We saw bar-tailed, which is the commonest one, and we looked for Hodgson's, isn't it? That's the other one, but we couldn't. We had no luck either there. So that's the way it goes.
Yeah. Kailashi Grindala is up to eastern part of Himachal. I don't think it's sort of, the range doesn't extend into Kashmir. So Grindala may not be possible. and thank you, friends, for joining us today. The next webinar will happen in due course, which is on homestays, because I'm also educating people on how to run homestays beautifully without losing their opportunities, and understanding how they can convert a tourist into an eco-tourist. So that's going to be the next one. But then there are many others which are coming up, including Brian's on Ladakh, and then there's one going to be on Borneo, and there's one going to be on Texel, which is a small island near Amsterdam, and many such webinars. And there's one going to be on Nagaland as well. Our tour is coming up in Nagaland end of October. If you want to join in, we'll send details across to you. And but Kashmir is a very, very special area for wildlife and birds. And also there are many splits happening. There's another langur which has been split recently called Chamba langur, which is another subspecies now, and another species, I think. So it'll be interesting to know more about mammals as well. We Deepak and I are going to sit down and do his mammal report along with Brian. Brian, are you okay with that? And then we'll put it on Mammal Watch for people to know more about mammals, even if there are a few. That's fine. That's no problem.
Of course. And if anybody wants to drop me an email, if they're thinking about visiting Kashmir, maybe next year, particularly from the UK, we could put a group together. I'd be more than willing to return.
Yes.
Someday.
Yes.
The sooner the better. But
Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. Yes, Andrew, I'll send you the Nagaland trip details as well. So thank you, friends. We're going to sign off now. It's 1 hour. Namaste, dosto. Namaste, friends. And thank you so much, Brian, for being here. You worked hard on this presentation, and it was really, really fruitful, really wonderful. I think it was worth every minute of it. Thank you. Thank you, friends. And thank you for being here. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.